We rarely pick a quarterback as our breakout player, but that's what we did last year with Jayden Daniels, and it paid off. Is he too expensive, or does he belong where he's going? Who else joins him in the top tiers, and who should you target or fade later at the position? We're running through our early QB rankings to hit on all those points and much more. An all-new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now. Matt Sheff and Jared Small of DraftSharks.com here to talk fantasy QB rankings. And they, of course, have been live on our site for months now, powered by the most accurate projections in the industry. We talked through the top group of quarterbacks in our recent episode on fantasy football tiers. We're going to dig into that group again today. We're going to run through our top 8. And we're going to talk about some of our favorite targets at the position, as well as some players or even ranges of the rankings that we're fading. I haven't asked Jared exactly what he's focused on in either of those areas here. So I'm going to be learning what he's doing at the same time you are. Before we start, though, know that these QB rankings are based on the default scoring formats that we use on DraftSharks.com. We all know that scoring can vary quite a bit by fantasy league. Even small differences in scoring can really change the order of these quarterbacks. Maybe it's 6-point touchdown passes. Maybe it's -1 versus -2 for turnover plays, maybe variations in yardage scoring. So the best way to see how we're ranking quarterbacks for your particular format is, of course, as always, to sync your league at DraftSharks.com. You'll get rankings specific to your format, specific to your draft, even down to the level of having programmatically generated tiers so that you'll see where we break the positional tiers for your particular league. That's new this year. We talked about that in our previous show, so you can check that out after you're done watching this one, of course. Jared, let's not delay it any further. Let's get to our top 8 at quarterback, and I'm going to break it by current tiers on DraftSharks.com. We've got number 1, Lamar Jackson. We've got number 2, Jayden Daniels. What do you think about that top of the QB rankings?
Yeah, and really the top, 4 guys here are very close. I think you could really order them however you want. I mean, of course, as we've talked about, our rankings are based on our projections, which are then applied to, your scoring system. And Lamar Jackson came out 1 for us. I have no issue with it at this point. We'll kind of see how things evolve as we get through the summer. But I mean, Lamar Jackson led quarterbacks in fantasy points and fantasy points per game last year. He was actually 2.5 points clear of the number 2 quarterback, Joe Burrow. So, Lamar was kind of easily the best fantasy quarterback last year. Set career bests in a lot of passing metrics, including PFF passing grade, on-target throw percentage. Of course, gives you the super bankable rushing production. What I like about Lamar, I mean, he's done it for a bunch of years now, but you just look at last year, led all quarterbacks in yards on designed runs, also led all quarterbacks in expected yards on designed runs. So that just tells us that, Baltimore continues to utilize Lamar's legs. I think that makes his rushing production as bankable as any quarterback in fantasy football.
Yeah, I've been a little bit hesitant to treat Lamar Jackson like the number 1 quarterback in drafts this year. And there are a couple things at play there. One, I'm generally that way about the guy who finished number 1 last year, going number 1 in ADP, because it's always going to be easier to not lead the position in scoring the next year as opposed to leading it again. So I don't think that aspect is wrong, but I think that I have been maybe also downplaying Lamar Jackson's, fit up at the top of the rankings versus just that aspect. I think I might have been weighing a little bit too heavily his 2020, which followed the last time that he was QB1 overall. He fell all the way down to QB10 at that point, then QB8 the following year in 2021. But 2021 and 2022 had him leave games early that affected his scoring average. And I looked back at the past couple of years before 2024. He was QB5 in 2022. He was QB4 in 2023. He has done just as well as the other guys, especially last year, at giving us a consistently high floor. And I think maybe the floor is what I was not paying enough attention to from last season. I was thinking, Lamar Jackson doesn't run for as many touchdowns as Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. That TD rate passing wise for him is more up and down. So I was thinking that the floor was a little bit lower for him. That just didn't bear out that way last year. And I think there's still some risk of his passing touchdown rate coming down, but what he doesn't deliver on rushing touchdowns, he does deliver on rushing yardage, and he does it every year. And he has done well on passing touchdown rates, even if, he's probably coming down from last year's high mark. It should still be a higher than usual mark. So Lamar Jackson, I think, belongs up in that range. He, Jayden Daniels, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, like you talked about, like we talked about on the tiers show, really all together in a tier. I wouldn't be surprised by those guys finishing in any order. And Jayden Daniels, it might seem like the same logic that I'm using to, I don't know, chip away at Lamar Jackson being QB1 should also apply to Jayden Daniels being so high. But I think that he just gave us the second most fantasy points ever for a rookie quarterback without doing anything that's really unsustainable. It doesn't mean that he won't come down for those numbers last year, but there's nothing that jumps out from Jayden Daniels' 2024 production and says, well, he's definitely not doing that again, like a high passing touchdown rate or, 10 touchdowns on not as many carries. He does a lot of things well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like you said, Matt, Jayden Daniels, second most total fantasy points by a rookie quarterback in NFL history, fifth most points per game, was awesome as a passer. He was sixth in the NFL in completion rate last year, 14th in yards per attempt, fifth in PFF passing grade. I said Lamar Jackson is the most bankable quarterback in terms of at least rushing yards. And to me, Jayden Daniels is probably second. He last year finished second among quarterbacks in carries. He was third in designed carries. He was second in rushing yards, third in rushing touchdowns. Now he heads into year two. Same offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. You like the continuity there. They add both Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil, one of the best left tackles in the NFL, where, pass protection was a concern for Daniels heading into last season and kind of remained a concern throughout the season. The O-line should be better. There's nothing to not like about Jayden Daniels, besides the fact that he's a lot more expensive this year than he was last year.
Yeah, that's a little unfortunate, but he's at least not priced out of the range of still being solid value. If you look at our ADP market index page, you'll see that he, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, by current best ball ADP, all those guys are good values. We've talked about it before, both on the tiers show and the best ball values show before that. Jalen Hurts, I think the best value among these guys, just because he's going the latest of the group. And if you view them all as not separated by that much, then you might as well focus on the guy that's going latest in the group. For me, it's not just Jalen Hurts going latest, but I don't think that 2025 is likely to look like 2024 did for the Eagles. Not that they're going to, go from run heavy to pass heavy. I'm not expecting that, but they were a 44% pass rate offense last year. They got a historic running back season from Saquon Barkley. I don't think either of those things repeat to the degree to which they happened last year. Throw in the injuries for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert that basically left Jalen Hurts without his top three pass catchers together for most of the season. I think he's bound to put up much better passing numbers this coming year than he did last year.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I expect more passing volume from Philly in 2025. And Hurts, by the way, when he did throw last year, he was really good. He set career highs last year in completion rate, adjusted completion rate, yards per attempt, actually tied a career high in yards per attempt, and a career high in touchdown rate. So the passing was good. He just didn't throw as much as he had in previous seasons. And then, of course, you get the goal line role, the rushing touchdown upside, 14 rushing scores for Hurts last year, which you could say, he's going to have trouble matching that. But he had 11.7 expected rushing touchdowns last year. That was 4.2 more than any other quarterback. It was fourth league-wide. Only 3 running backs had more expected rushing touchdowns last year than Jalen Hurts did. So, it's not just that he got lucky in terms of rushing touchdowns. It's the fact that the Eagles offense is very good, and Hurts gets all those opportunities at the 1 yard line. So I think you can, again, count on him for at least 10 plus rushing scores.
And he's done it repeatedly. It's not like he went, 7, 8, 7, 13 touchdowns. So we can expect double-digit touchdowns from him on the ground. Number 5 on this list, slight separation versus the top 4, Joe Burrow. We've talked about that slight separation. You can quibble with it. He finished 2 last year. So we know the upsides there. He doesn't do it quite like that group of 4 quarterbacks up top, but he does the passing stuff even better and has T. Higgins and Jamar Chase locked in. So I think Joe Burrow, pretty safe QB5.
Yeah, he's a safe quarterback 5. He's not approaching those top 4, but he's also clearly ahead of everyone else. And he's not approaching the top 4 because of the lack of rushing. But what's crazy is that Burrow's passing role was so good last year. He actually led quarterbacks in expected fantasy points per game, which is just crazy when you think about the lack of rushing attempts and, attempts near the goal line he had compared to these other guys. But Burrow, 68 more pass attempts than any other quarterback. He was also first in the league in throws into the end zone, red zone pass attempts inside the 10-yard line, expected passing touchdowns. So we know the Bengals are pass heavy. They stay pass heavy or sometimes go even pass heavier inside the red zone. So Burrow's like always a kind of a tough click for me in drafts because if I'm going to spend one of my first 5 picks on a quarterback, I want them to give me rushing production. And we know Burrow's not really going to do that. We just look at the numbers and there's no reason to expect this Bengals offense to change, right? They've been pass heavy for 3 years now. Same personnel on offense coming back. The defense probably isn't going to be that much better. I think Burrow's a safe bet to again be at or near the top of the league in basically all passing metrics.
And similar to what I said with Lamar Jackson, you would think, Joe Burrow doesn't run like the other guys, so his floor is lower, so you're going to get more week-to-week variability. That wasn't the case last year. Again, an isolated season, maybe his passing touchdown rate is lower this year. Maybe something else comes down, but the passing touchdown rate was not out of line with his previous numbers. The yards per attempt were not out of line with his previous numbers and really not especially high versus what he could do. So could certainly put up similar numbers, was a consistent scorer for us on a weekly basis last year. So belongs at that number 5. I wouldn't argue with taking him there, even if that's, like you said, not really the range where I'm definitely taking a quarterback. Patrick Mahomes behind Joe Burrow, definitely some separation between those two. Although we've talked about it before, Mahomes certainly has shown us in the past, and probably with his current set of receivers, has the upside to jump into that higher group. Just hasn't been close to it over the past couple years. So a little tougher to bet on, what could be versus what we have seen over the past couple years. I think that there's a little bit of separation because of what he's shown us before between Mahomes and the other guys with him in the tier, number 7, Kyler Murray, and number 8, Bo Nix.
Yeah, I think if someone's going to jump into that top 5, I think it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. I think he has the upside to have a Burrow-esque passing season. And Mahomes gives us he gives us more rushing than Burrow, nowhere near those top 4 guys, but he's going to give us some rushing. Joe Burrow was number 1 last year among quarterbacks in expected fantasy points per game. Patrick Mahomes was number 2. He finished quarterback 11 in actual points per game. He was the 6th biggest underachiever at quarterback if you compare expected points per game versus actual, which is just crazy because we know Mahomes is still, one of the handful of most talented, maybe the most talented quarterback in the NFL. So we should not expect him to continue to underachieve going forward. So that to me is just the biggest mark in his favor. Then of course you tack on the fact that his receivers should be healthier and better this year, right? Rashee Rice misses most of last season with his injury. Marquise Brown misses most of last season with his injury. You have Xavier Worthy coming into year 2 now after showing well over the back half of last season. So if those receivers stay healthy, yeah, I think Mahomes should bounce back. This guy's finished quarterback 11 and quarterback 9 the last 2 seasons, but he was a top 6 fantasy quarterback in each of his first 5 years. He was a safe bet. Doesn't have the upside to, lead the position in fantasy points probably because of the lack of rushing. But I think he could, very easily, finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback again this year.
Now, if you're like, wait a second, why are Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes at the top of expected points for quarterback? I mean, that's because the rushing from those top 4 guys, a lot of it comes from scrambling, and an expected points formula can't be like, oh, okay, he drops back this many times, he's probably going to scramble for 500 yards. So those are the kinds of unexpected production that those top 4 can get that's missing from the Mahomes and Joe Burrow profile. It's why that might not seem to align. Like I mentioned, Kyler Murray, Bo Nix with Patrick Mahomes in that tier. Bo Nix, to me, is the guy that least belongs this high, and it's his second season, so we don't know what's ahead. He might have an even better second year than he had as a first year, but just a sampling of what I'm a bit wary of with Bo Nix in this range from my profile among Denver Broncos. Among 47 quarterbacks with 100-plus dropbacks last year, Bo Nix ranked 15th in completion rate, fine, 21st in adjusted completion rate, which accounts for things like throwaways and drops, 18th in passing yards per game, but 32nd in yards per pass attempt, 22nd in completion rate over expected, 6th in touchdown passes, 10th in touchdown rate. So touchdown passes really helped him out a lot. And we see that quite a bit at quarterback, where guys who finish surprisingly high often have a higher than expected touchdown rate, which can boost that. So I'm a little bit wary of that number coming down to meet some of his other rates, as opposed to all of those other rates coming up in his second season, especially because I think we're still talking about a limited set of Broncos receivers.
That's all fair. And, we've talked about Nix as someone we're not drafting a ton of because he's in this big tier, basically from, Kyler Murray down to our quarterback 15, Drake May. They're separated by like 3 or 4 3D value points, which is not a whole lot. So because of that, I'm not drafting a ton of Nix because he tends to go higher than a lot of the other guys in this tier. I think he belongs at quarterback 8 though. He's finished quarterback 10 in points per game last year. He was quarterback 6 in expected points per game. And what I like is he took a big leap from the first half of his rookie season to the second half. He went from 61.2% completion rate over his first 7 games and 5.6 yards per attempt to 69.7% completion rate, 7.4 yards per attempt over his final 10 games. He was quarterback 7 in fantasy points per game over those final 10. Nix gives us some rushing too. He was 5th among quarterbacks in carries, 8th in rushing yards last year. I expect that to continue. He did that in college as well. So good rookie season going into year 2 with a established offensive mind in Sean Payton. Broncos added some weapons this offseason, Evan Ingram and RJ Harvey being the 2 most notable. Again, not excited to draft Nix at ADP, but I do think, quarterback 8 is kind of where he belongs to me, at least.
Yeah, he should be an ascending player this year. And the scoring splits, the performance splits last year are interesting. Sometimes we can get ourselves into trouble by saying, this is what he did over this period, but this is what he did later. And because it's a rookie, we should devalue that stretch and look more at the later stuff because he got used to the league. And that's going to be more like what he does going forward. And maybe that's the case. Or maybe it was, an easier set of opponents or other factors that just made him perform better over that stretch. And maybe we should pay more attention to the entire thing together. So I can't say right now which of those is correct, but that's, something that we as fantasy analysts can do and get ourselves into trouble at times. So I'll be curious to see exactly what we get from Bo Nix in season 2. Certainly a player that Denver and others should be excited about long-term. I'm a little wary of him at cost right now, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we get to the fades. Like I said, Bo Nix is one of the Broncos that I profiled. You can check out the Broncos team article that posted on draftsharks.com on Monday. You can read all those profiles. You can see more of the stats that have me a little bit hesitant on paying up for Bo Nix in his second season. Jared, let's go now to positive stuff, though, and talk about our draft targets at the position. What are you targeting primarily at QB?
Yeah, so for me, it starts with those elites. And we can talk about Josh Allen in the next section a little bit. Not that I don't like Josh Allen, but to me, it's Lamar Jackson and especially Jayden Daniels and Jalen Hurts as the 2 guys I'm targeting most, because those guys you can often get in round 4. I've even seen Jalen Hurts drop into early round 5 a lot of times. So I think those guys have nearly as good a chance as Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen to lead all quarterbacks in fantasy points this season. And you're getting them a bit later. So that starts there for me. If I can get one of those guys, Jayden Daniels or Jalen Hurts in, round 4, I'm seriously considering that. Later on, I talked about Trevor Lawrence on our most recent Sleepers episode. So you can check that out if you want to hear the case for Trevor Lawrence. But Justin Fields is my favorite mid-round quarterback target. He's quarterback 13 in ADP still on Underdog. He's our quarterback 9 in our rankings. And again, he's super close to Kyler Murray at quarterback 7, super close to Bo Nix at quarterback 8. If we make one small adjustment on Justin Fields projections, he could be our quarterback 7. Really, of course, comes down to the rushing with Justin Fields. He's averaged 50 rushing yards per game for his career. That's second among quarterbacks over the last 4 seasons, behind only Lamar Jackson. That's going to continue in New York. I don't have much concern about that. And I just think Fields is a good bet to start the entire season. I think they want to see what they have in him. It makes sense. There's really no reason for this team to go to Tyrod Taylor. So Justin Fields is going to be a top 10 quarterback when he's on the field. And again, you're getting him at quarterback 13 in ADP right now.
Yeah, Fields could have been a risk to see the sideline if they had drafted one, but I think part of the reason they gave him that 2-year contract is they didn't love what they were going to be looking at quarterback in the draft. So I think that they want Justin Fields to at least be the starter for this year, and we'll see about next year. And the ceiling is high. I agree with you on the top 4. I agree with you on targeting Justin Fields next. Joe Burrow is close to that top 4. I think I'm going to be more interested in him at cost in lineup setting time, because right now it's kind of, do I have Jamar Chase? Do I have T Higgins? And if not, then I'm not super interested in Joe Burrow, because in a best ball tournament, I'm definitely going to be competing against teams that have Burrow and either Chase or T Higgins, maybe both at times. So he's just kind of there. If I don't have a Bengals receiver when he comes up at a sensible spot, I'm probably passing, unless, he slides way past ADP. Justin Fields, I like for all the reasons that you said. He's QB 10 in underdog ADP right now. And probably the biggest reason that I'm not interested in Bo Nix is what's right behind him. And that is a tier of 12 players by our rankings right now that all trail Bo Nix in baseline projection, but every single guy in that range beats Bo Nix in our ceiling projection. So even though we have Bo Nix ranked higher, all those guys have at least as much ceiling, if not more. And that for me is just enough reason to pass on him and wait for other options in that range. You touched on some of the players. We've touched on some of the players before, but it's really that range from Dak Prescott at QB 13 and current best ball ADP to CJ Stroud at QB 19 in best ball ADP right now. Dak has climbed the ADP board up to 13. I still think he's a value at that spot, so I'm still taking him. And Jordan Love, I've mentioned before, is one of my favorites in that range because he's all the way down at QB 17 in underdog drafting. He's already displayed the high fantasy ceiling to us over the second half of 2023. He's operating in a proven offensive system under Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. There's enough talent around him. They are attractive stacking options that stay on the board longer than, say, the Jacksonville receivers do. So I can draft Jordan Love and then decide how I'm going to stack him, or at least draft a receiver of his closer to where I'm taking him. There's rushing ability, which is easy to forget about because we didn't really see it last year because of a combo of his injuries to the lower body and the run heaviness of the Packers. So I expect both of those things to swing at least some back in Jordan Love's favor this year and help the rushing show back up. I expect to see more passing volume in that Green Bay offense. And he's just going in a range where I can take a mild bet on those things happening as opposed to going out on a limb and trusting them to happen.
Yeah, like I think there's good profit potential with Love at his current ADP and really not much downside. Like I don't think he's going to really finish much lower than he's getting drafted right now. For me, it's Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, and Drake May as my favorite targets once Justin Fields is off the board, kind of in that mid-round range. One more target for me, and I didn't really think he was a target for me, but the more and more I've been drafting over the last month, I've ended up with a lot of Bryce Young. He is quarterback 25 in ADP. We have him quarterback 22. It's not a big difference, but I've just ended up with a lot of Bryce Young, and I feel good about it. I mean, he obviously horrible rookie season, horrible start to his second season last year. Comes back from the benching though from week 8 on, and all his passing metrics were much, much better. Not that they were like amazing, but it was a big jump for what he had been doing. They were good metrics for what he was working with, right? Like we know that Panthers pass catching core still was not very good last year, but Bryce Young from week 8 on, he was quarterback 17 in fantasy points per game. He was 6th among 35 qualifying quarterbacks in PFF passing grade. He was 1st among those 35 in big time throw rate, which, is a PFF metric, kind of measures, more downfield passes into tighter windows, just higher difficulty level of passes. Bryce Young led the NFL in big time throw rate over the final 10 or so weeks of the season. Now he adds Pat McMillan to the wide receiver core, the first round rookie. Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker, year 2 wide receivers who, could take a leap this season. And Bryce Young gives us some rushing upside too. He, last year, again, from week 8 on, 22.3 rushing yards per game. He's at 6.1 yards per carry for his career so far. That's actually 3rd best among 35 quarterbacks with at least 50 carries over the last 2 seasons. So I think he can take another step forward as a passer, add some rushing ability as well. And again, he's going quarterback 25 for a guy who, is a locked-in starter heading into year 3 with a strong offensive mind, improved pass catching core. I think there's a lot to like about Bryce Young at that price tag.
Is he just a best ball play for you? You think you'll be interested in rostering him in redraft as well?
Get to redraft it. It'd be super flex only profit. I'm not taking a quarterback, that far down the rankings in a lineup setting league.
If you think Jared is nuts for talking up Bryce Young, even for best ball purposes, or if you think I'm overrating Jordan Love, or if you agree with us and you just want to let us know that, hit us in the comments on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast, and subscribe to catch the rest of our positional ranking shows, because we're going to be hitting each position over the next few shows. Now we're going to turn to our fades at quarterback. And Jared, it's a range that we already talked about. For me, it's not just Bo Nix, it's also Baker Mayfield at QB7 because of his very high passing touchdown rate that inflated his fantasy numbers last year. And it's Kyler Murray in between them. So Kyler Murray is a bit less of a fade than Baker Mayfield or Bo Nix because of the rushing for him, because we've seen him finish in QB1 range every year of his career on a per game basis. The higher floor because of the rushing, but I'm not sure that Kyler Murray has the ceiling to actually be a target in that range, or to be, to make me scared of passing over him. A 4.1% career passing touchdown rate. He's been sub 4% in that category for 3 straight years and 4 of his 6 seasons overall. He says he's going to run more in 2025, but the 33.6 rushing yards per game last year were really right in line with his career numbers. So it's not like he fell off in that category last year versus what we saw previously. If anything, if you look at Kyler Murray's numbers overall, 2020's rushing production set the bar too high. He hasn't gotten back to that level any other year in his career. Last year gave us a career high in yards per carry and his second best rushing touchdown rate. So if anything, there might even be some room for his per game numbers to fall off in that area. Really though, I think he's fine, but I don't think he has the ceiling to actually get up into the top 6 like I used to believe that he did.
Yeah, I mean, I think Murray has the theoretical ceiling, right? Because we know he can run and he has, at least solid passing upside. The rushing stuff's interesting. Like you said, Matt, career high in yards per carry for Kyler last year. He did set career lows, though, in rush attempts per game and designed rush attempts per game. So if they do let him run more, if he's willing to run more, like you could find some of the ceiling come back. Kyler does have quarterback 4 and quarterback 5 fantasy finishes in points per game in 2020 and 2021. So we're kind of going back a ways now. The last 3 years, he's been quarterback 10, and quarterback 12. I'm with you, Matt. He's much less of a fade for me than Bo Nix and Baker Mayfield, because I think, again, Kyler, at least you can at least tell yourself a story where he, jumps into the top 6 because of that rushing upside. But I don't think it's super likely, just what we've seen over the last 3 years now. My other fade, along with Nix and Mayfield in that kind of mid to low end quarterback 1 territory, is Jared Goff. He's our quarterback 16 in our rankings. He finished quarterback 8 last year, but Goff was just 15th among quarterbacks in expected points per game. He was the 4th biggest overachiever at the position. As we've talked about in recent podcasts, we're just expecting some natural regression from the Lions. They just scored so many touchdowns last year. I think the departure of Ben Johnson only, gives us further reason to expect some regression from this offense. The other thing with Goff, too, he really benefited from yards after catch last year. And I think Ben Johnson deserves a lot of credit for that. Goff averaged 6.8 yards after catch per completion last year. That led all 43 qualifying quarterbacks. Just for comparison, he was at 5.5 yards after catch per completion over his first 3 seasons in Detroit. So I think there's just a bunch of reasons to expect Goff's numbers to take a bit of a step back this coming season. Obviously doesn't give us any rushing upside, so he needs to do it as a passer. It's just not a bet I want to make.
To be fair, drafters have at least sharpened on that since the beginning of the draft season. He was going right around QB 8 in the earliest best ball drafts. He's down, as of this morning, he's down to QB 14 in underdog drafts. So I think that's more like where he belongs. Still not a target for me in that range, because we can still find other guys with at least as much upside, if not more, such as Dak Prescott has showed us that he's got top 6 upside at the position in a good passing season. So I agree. Still not targeting Jared Goff, and especially because I don't tend to have his receivers when I get to the point where I might consider drafting Jared Goff in best ball right now. But we'll leave that for future talk about the Lions. Whether you are drafting best ball teams right now or just looking ahead to prepare for summer redraft season, it's never too early to sync your teams at draftsharks.com. You will get rankings specific to your format. You will see tier breaks specific to your format, and you will get the strongest set of team management tools in the industry to help you build and then maintain that championship roster all year long and beyond if you're playing Dynasty. Let Draft Sharks be your unfair advantage.